Always a pleasure to welcome in our next guest, of course. You see him now on MLB Network, former manager of the Baltimore Orioles, and our friend Mr. Buck Showalter, who is with us once again on GCR. Buck, always great to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time for us.
Glenn, how you doing? Down here in Texas, uh, everybody talks about the heat of summer. Are there any places more hotter for about 3 weeks than that Inner Harbor, Baltimore?
So it's unreal, Buck. I've taken the boy. I got a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old son. I'm taking them tonight, and it's a 7 o'clock game. And it's all I can think about is like they're gonna be miserable. It's gonna be hell. And
You
then
know what I want to do? I told my wife the other day, I want to buy a ticket. I want to sit in the upper deck in left field when they don't have a big crowd and just sit up there by myself and then take it in. Then I got to thinking, I said, well, I better check the weather first. If it's one of those summer days, Rick Dempsey used to talk about it. It's the hottest place he's ever caught for about 3 weeks.
Those Sunday afternoon games when you are sitting in the sun, and you don't even think about it when you buy the tickets, right? You're just like, I'm going to go to the game. And then you realize you're sitting on the side with no shade, and
the air doesn't move. The air does not move.
Not at all.
And but you know, it's what's that country music song? Old men sit around and talk about the weather, and old women sit around and talk about old men. Hey, it's been hot in the summer for a long time, Glenn.
That's a good point. Hey, what's a goo-goo cluster?
Oh, come on, man! That's the famous Nashville candy. It looks like a turtle. It's got like nuts and caramel and chocolate. It's a big thing in Tennessee. My wife turned me on to them. I can't eat them much because they're. Have you had one?
No, I don't think I've ever had one. Like I saw a buddy of mine told me you were talking about them on MLB Network, and he was trying to explain it to me, and I'm like, I don't think I've ever had one of these in my life.
It's got. Think of remember the Reggie Jackson thing?
Yeah, the Reggie bar.
Yeah, it's similar to that, except it's a staple in Tennessee, and I don't know, Standard Sugar Candy Company, something like that. But they used to give them when I played in the minor league. That was a big deal. If you were player of the game, you got a box of Goo Goo clusters.
What was the go-to for you during games? Like, were you seeds? What was the play during games?
Yeah, I look at these guys now. They eat 4 or 5 times a day. They come to the ballpark. They eat a lunch. Then they eat a pre-BP meal. Then they eat a post-BP meal. During the game, they get a snack. Then the post-game. I mean, my God, I grew up. My dad believed in me playing on a light stomach. I would get a piece of dry toast, unsweetened tea, maybe half a baked potato, and maybe a flank steak if we could afford it. And you play it on a light stomach. People they can't go. You know, like getting on a flight. Oh, God, I can't be on the plane without something to eat for a whole hour. Really? Anyway, it's the world we grew up in. It's like we got to constantly. So you asked me my go-to during a meal. I've had some sunflower seeds now and then, but I always felt bad about the groundskeeper because someone's got to pick those seed shells up.
That's true. I can't remember. Were you a gum chewer?
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah. I won't tell many people this, but I had a little ritual late in the game if we had a lead that I would go through.
Okay.
And seemed to work out pretty good.
Yeah, and you're not, and I can't get you. You're taking that one to your deathbed?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Maybe a book one day, but the book they want me to write, I would throw too many people under the bus, so I'm not going to write it.
Buck, I am. It's so funny because like the Orioles and Yankees look like they could both win 113 games this season. It's nuts, right?
You know, I looked at the other day, Glenn. There were only like 9 teams over 500 in baseball.
Yeah,
at one point,
like all of the NL wildcard race is like teams that are under 500 right now.
Yeah.
So,
but who knows?
So it's frustrating. It's frustrating, and what you just said there, because like Orioles fans are like frustrated. The Orioles are really good. They keep looking up, and the Yankees keep winning too. What you saw last year. Is there any argument that you're better off not winning the division at this point? I'm not trying to suggest that you don't try to. I want to make that abundantly clear.
Oh, you can make a case for it. It's just the game more than ever is just get a couple of hot starting pitchers and a couple guys in the pen that are peaking at the right time. It's all about and having a mentality of maybe the little engine that could. The Yankees. Last year were really, really good for a long time, and then it kind of fell apart. But there's not really many secrets. Both those two teams are pitching so well. I mean, you look at the league leaders, and everybody's trying to have a perfect pitching staff, but that's the key to those. If you look at the 5 or 6 teams at the top of the winning percentage, they're usually very close to the leaders in pitching.
But is it crazy to say that for as much pitching as the Orioles have, and as much confidence as we have in Bradish and Burns, of course, and even Grayson Rodriguez, that this is the nature? You want to win a World Series, you still might have to go get more. Like, you might need to have, guys get hurt after July 30th. There's no second trade deadline anymore. Is it crazy to think that even though you're confident in what you have, that you got to live in a world where you have 7, 8 starting pitchers on your roster that you have confidence in if you want to win a World Series?
Well, one of the keys, and it seems like they've been following it, you got to know who you are as an organization. You're not the Yankees, but you can do some things better than them. I know one of the big moves that we made was when Mr. Angelos agreed to start paying the 6-year free agents, the minor league free agents, more money, because we could out opportunity the Yankees, but we couldn't outpay AAA what if players. The Steve Pearsons, some of the guys like Nate McLeod, different guys that we were able to bring in there once we got on a par with what they were paying minor league guys, which give you that depth. But now the Orioles are good enough to provide that depth from within the organization. But I'd be very careful about when someone says you got to do this. No, you don't. You don't have to do anything. Know who you are. A couple of additions here and there, but you got to be careful about backing yourself into something you feel like you've got to do, and you kind of lose sight of who you really are as an organization.
Buck, one of the things that I think about a lot with you is the reverence that you showed veteran players and guys that had proved things in this game, and the respect that you had for them. And I feel like the Craig Kimbrel conversation is fairly loud in Baltimore right now.
Tough.
What do you do? This is a guy that's accomplished everything that you brought in to be a closer. He's looked great in moments, and he's looked quite human in other moments. Can you trust someone at this place in your career to be the guy that you try to win a World Series with?
The tough thing, Glenn, is there's an old adage: never let a star fall on you.
Mm-hmm.
And you try to, but there's also another one about trust the pedigree. But the question is, you got to ask yourself: is this just a trust in the pedigree and it'll happen, or is this the end of the road with him? Is the breaking ball and the fastball backing up to each other, and the command and things that go on? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Do you trust it enough? Because you better have a plan if you're wrong. If we're wrong, where are we going?
Right.
Keep in mind there's usually some heroes late in the season. You really only need 2 quality starters the way the playoffs are set up. That's one of the reasons why we ended up with Randy Johnson and Kurt Schilling out in Arizona, because we felt like if we had those 2 guys, and if they just won their starts in the playoffs, you're world champions. So you can take one of those starters. I mean, what would Grayson Rodriguez look like coming out of the pen?
Filthy.
Yeah, anyway, there's a way around it. I'd be careful about just saying, gosh, we've got to do this. That's no, you don't. You don't have to do anything. Stay true to who you are.
Buck Showalter with us here on GCR. Buck, we're running low on guys that played in Baltimore for Buck Showalter that are still here in Baltimore. Cedric Mullins, of course, is one of those guys. And I kind of default back to what I just asked you about, showing respect and reverence to guys. And we're hoping that this week we're seeing Cedric start to turn the corner a little bit. But what does this look like? Can you just sort of take me through, a manager, a player, when you have someone that you know what they're capable of and they're just not doing it for a prolonged period of time? What does that look like? How do you handle that as a manager?
Well, Cedric's a great kid. I remember the first time we saw him, it was over in Pirate City, and I talked to Brian Graham, the farm director. I said, hey, can we just bring somebody over here that's plays with their hair on fire and's got some athletic skill? This is right at the very start. And he goes, yeah, I'll send you this kid, Cedric Mullins. Some people really kind of like him, but he's, this and that, whatever. He came over and had the game that you wouldn't believe. I brought him in about the 5th inning. I said, Brian, this kid can play.
Mm-hmm.
And he just had a nice way about him. But you pull for guys like him. But you always say when they're struggling a little bit, what's changed? What's different? There's not that safety net that they've got nobody else. Well, they do have somebody else. And first of all, Glenn, let's make sure we keep in mind, a lot of people would love to have the Orioles problem.
Oh, no doubt, right?
I mean, if Cedric Mullins is their biggest issue, I'd be careful about counting him out. He's a kid that very quietly, and I haven't been around him in a long time. I think the last time I looked, there were 11 guys on that 40-man roster that were there when I left. So I do keep an eye on them. Austin Hayes, some of those kids. Grayson, we drafted him the last year. I think as we get away from it, you realize what a good job Dan Duquette's scouting department did towards the end there. They've got some really good Mountcastle. There's some good players there. Dylan Tate came in that trade. So did a couple of the other kids. But they made some good moves in the meantime.
Buck, I bring it up, and I feel like it's funny because you're 100% right. Like, all of this conversation is qualified. The Orioles are incredibly good. Like, they're an unbelievably good team. They've separated themselves.
And fun.
No doubt. No question about it. I feel like the conversations we're now having are about, what's the difference in being a really good team and being a team that can win a World Series? And that's like the context by which we're having the conversation. And you probably know better than anybody, like, the difficulty of it. Being as close as you were a few times, do you get the sense for whether or not, like, there is a formula, a sauce to do this, you can win a World Series? Or is it just, as you allude to, get in and the right things happen, and now you're a World Series winner?
Well, it's you're rolling the dice in October. I've said before, there's really 4 times you manage. You manage spring training differently. You manage a regular season differently. You manage September baseball with the call-ups differently, and the postseason's different. There's just a sense of urgency that changes with all of them. But sometimes things happen. You go, wow, I thought I really had this figured out and had it in control. And the baseball guys, remember in 2014, we were doing, we didn't have Manny, we didn't have Chris, I think. Yeah. But we still had the fill-ins, and we had it going on. And we go to Kansas City. I mean, their base hits are hitting the bags and going up in the air. Balls are hitting the rubber. Their balls landing on the line. Ours is half an inch off. Their home runs are scraping a foul pole. We're barely. And finally, about the third game, I looked around and said, the baseball gods are just really mean right now. I mean, we couldn't. I mean, everything they did was coming up, on the 50-50. They were winning all of them. So just get there. And sometimes you want to kind of be under the radar. I think when you're front and center and the whole world is saluting you about you're the greatest ever, sometimes that's a little, that can be a little intimidating. I did a thing with MLB this year about the weight of expectations. The first time you're not the little engine that could, and now all of a sudden you're expected to be good. That's why I think the Orioles have turned a corner, and the fans there are going to have a lot of fun for a long time because they have met those weight of expectations, and they're still doing well. And there's a lot of teams, if you look around baseball, everybody thought we're going to go to this next level. It's like the guy that hits 10 home runs and you think he's going to hit 15 the next year and 20 the next year and 25 the next year, and it doesn't happen. You seek your level, and the sport plays so many games that you're always going to have your strengths and weaknesses show up.
If I could give you, like if I could make a checklist, you can have, you referenced, 2 starting pitchers. If I gave you a checklist for, these are the 4 things that I can have. I know I have about a team, just generically, right? Like, a guy that hits 50 home runs. If there were 3 or 4 things that generically you'd want to have about a team going into the playoffs, what would those things be?
Oh, I have to give that some thought. That's pretty broad. I want the defensive core to be consistent, and I want runs to matter late in the game. Nothing kind of weighs on the morale of the team. We had Jim Johnson there. We had Zach Britton. We had Edwin Diaz with the Mets. I mean, we had people that could make runs matter. In other words, that when players aren't constantly going, how much is enough to give us that window if someone has a hiccup? And the 9th inning's different. You can't just take somebody from the 7th or 8th inning and stick them back there. But I think the consistency of making runs matter. It takes. That was what's so great about Mariano Rivera for a year, other than just success, was that there was no stress in his outings. It was 10 or 11 pitches. It was throwing strikes, no walks. He didn't let the ball leave the ballpark. He filled his position, and he held runners on whenever they would get a broken bat single. And there was no stress in his outings. And these top step Stanhouse, Earl Weaver, half pack of cigarettes to get through the 9th inning, it wears on a team. You said 3 things. I'd have to think about it. I just think an intelligent club that doesn't have ups and downs and knows who they are. I think that usually plays well. But I wouldn't underestimate catching the baseball. It plays in the postseason.
So I got to ask you about, it's funny. Buck Showalter, by the way, is here on GCR, if you weren't already aware. So we keep talking constantly about this team and everything this team has done. The other thing that we have been talking about a lot this year has been balls and strikes, Buck. And I am sure that you're going to remind me that it's a hell of a difficult job, and I know that's true. But it really does feel like we're almost reaching a breaking point, and that there's going to be something that happens. I just wonder what.
Okay, well, we're reaching the breaking point because this box is on TV,
Right.
which is not very accurate, by the way. Everybody should know that's not purely what is happening. Okay, and they found out in AAA. This is interesting that as the hole for your back foot gets worn down during the game, you have a little different strike zone. It doesn't pick. It's interesting that. There's a lot of kinks they're trying to work out on this thing. It's coming. I think you're going to have a challenge system. It's going to start out, and you're going to find out very quickly which of your player, I think it's going to be the catcher, the pitcher, and maybe the hitter, of which one you can trust and not trust.
You give them the
I
chance.
wish sometimes these guys slide into second and they point over the dugout like, check it. The manager would like to say, no, you know what? No kidding. Yeah. And every time you're wrong, you have to hit the next time with one strike on you or something. It's very aggravating for coaches and managers to have these guys like, we're not looking or paying any attention to it. It's funny, but it's coming. And I said the other night on the air, I was doing the Braves game, or I don't know what it was, but there was a guy, Quinn Walcott, who I think led all of baseball in accuracy of ball strikes last year, and he's about fifth this year. I mean, it's a skill, Glenn. It's a talent to be that accurate. 94 something or 95 he was last year. And I think they're going to end up with a challenge system. And, if you're wrong, you're going to lose some things. There's parts of it I'm wondering where it's going to end up. But I don't think you're going to ever see a purely mechanical strike zone for a while anyway. They're going to see if the challenge system works well. And most people I talk to in AAA like it. They like it. And it's pretty quick. And I think it actually has a little bit of a fan entertainment factor because they show it up on the board as they're looking at it. What do you think?
See, I am a tennis player. Or I was a tennis player. I hardly.
My wife says it makes the same argument. My wife makes the same argument.
And Buck, it's so easy. It's the easiest thing in the world. Everybody accepts it. It's fact. That's the way it is. It gets rid of. I'm sure John McEnroe would have still found something to yell about because that's who he is. But you just don't have the same. It's not. You just go play tennis. Like you get rid of that part of the game. And I remember you saying something once though. Didn't you tell us once that you kind of missed arguing with umpires a little bit?
They've taken that out of play. They've taken that out of play. The only thing that would get me the last 3 or 4 years is attitude. Somebody sniping you or saying something to a young player. I hate bullying or hazing young players that come up, and they've eliminated a lot of that. And it's attitude that used to put me over the top because the ball strike, the out safe, you usually get right with replay, and sometimes they've just kind of taken it out of there because. And I think everybody I think the fans miss that a little bit too. And the umpires used to almost, I don't want to say play along with you, but understood that they were part of the entertainment package too.
I almost wonder if Earl Weaver would have been as great of a manager if that part of the game wasn't part of it.
Good question.
Right?
Good question.
Did he need that edge in order to be that type of? Earl was a pleasant guy, right?
Was he doing post-game interviews with Masson after every game and before every game?
No,
I don't think so.
Lord,
he wouldn't have. That wouldn't have gone well.
He did radio, and there's some famous, like he would do radio pregame, and there are some famous clips of Earl from that. But
I got a couple of those that they promised me they'd never air.
Oh man, I would love that. We got to track it down somehow. I'm gonna call over.
Oh no. It's funny is we used to call it the interrogation. Pregame. With when I was with the Rangers, Eric Nadell was really good, and I said, "Eric, is this a pregame show or an interrogation?"
Get after you that way. Okay, I promise this will be it for this time, Buck. I
got to know. You talk about rule changes. I want to hear other ones. I like the idea of 2 bags at first base. They did it in the SEC tournament.
I love that.
Yeah,
why do we put ourselves through this?
Well, one is you take that lane out of play and all the stuff going down there that they still haven't really corrected, and You take away injury factor with the first baseman. It actually makes it easier to umpire because I would make the bags a little bit softer, more like a bag instead of a hard plastic that people slip off of. And these guys that come off the base quarter of an inch barely because somebody kind of pushed them. Yeah, I don't think that's not the intent of the rule.
Hate that. Oh, we are in complete agreement about that, Buck. Hate that, hold the tag on and maybe you can kind of force them off a little bit and stealing out that way. That sucks. That's dreadful. I absolutely.
I've become a Maverick fan here. I watched a little bit of them last night. They're not doing too well, but I thought about the Baltimore Bullets and Earl Monroe. Where did they play at?
They played at the arena, the same arena that sits here to this day that they finally renovated a couple years ago to at least make it, passable. They played in that building.
Well, they never could have got away with the nickname in today's world.
They certainly couldn't have. That's why they were still the Washington Bullets. That's why they changed into the Wizards, and that's probably a dumber name.
Some of the problems that Washington's having, that would have been appropriate. Okay, I'll stop.
I don't even remember what I wanted to finish with. This is why I love talking to you. All right, I'll finish with this. I have talked a lot about the decisions and the power that a manager has these days, and it's interesting to me. I think you and I have spoken before. I'm a Brandon Hyde guy. I really think that the best thing that a manager and I know you've said that a few times. I think the best thing a manager does anymore is the relationships with the players and how that impacts. And it feels like anymore the data sort of determines so many of the old school decisions that we relate to a manager. So I wanted to run that by you just generically. The job of a manager and what the most important thing in 2024 is for a manager to do, considering we know how many of these decisions are just the organization top down says, hey, here's what we believe in, this is what we're doing, this is what we want you to do in certain spots.
Well, they define it pretty clearly. I think the best organizations kind of blend both sides of the spectrum, so to speak. The things that you only know from being around these guys every day in the locker room and spring training, sometimes 15 hours a day, 7 days in a row. I mean, and having respect for, the yes, but answers. Yes, that's true, but. And I think the morale of everybody, like making sure that everybody feels comfortable bringing what they bring, whether it's from an analytical sabermetric standpoint or whether it's from just a human being heartbeat situation where you got to take everything and make sure everybody feels comfortable walking in your locker and that you're not just putting a hand up to certain types of information. You want to be open to and you're responsible for creating that environment. And Brandon, I like the new manager with the Mets. I think he does a good job with it too, but you do have a little bit of door opener with so many young players, but sooner or later they kind of figure out that you can be a ship passing the night. They can do without managers and coaches, but they can't do without players. But I think the one thing you really have to be responsible for in today's game is when the game gets off script. In other words, the teleprompter breaks. You got all these plans. This guy's going to pitch this inning. This guy can only pitch this, and this starter. And all of a sudden, the starter doesn't go but 1 or 2 innings. The game's off script. It's off. The teleprompter's broke. All of a sudden, somebody that normally would have done this can't do this. Things happen in the game. Somebody gets hurt, has to come out of the game. That requires a manager having a feel and a touch and understanding of sometimes you may not put your best foot forward so that you can be consistent over the course of the next 2 weeks. So just understand the ebb and flow of a season and thinking about the long game and the short game.
Buck Showalter, you're the best, my friend. Always appreciate you. Let's talk again real soon, all right?
All right, Glenn. Thanks for having me. Tell everybody in Baltimore hello. Bye-bye.